You know, there are stereotypes in all walks of life, and as a creative person I can understand the usefulness of stereotypes. It just helps to establish a character, particularly when you work in fiction. It does help to establish a character. So what about the stereotypes of pipe smokers? The type of music that a pipe smoker would listen to. You'd think maybe Vaughan Williams or Barry Manilow. Not in this life. What about heavy metal? Heavy metal and pipe smoking? Doesn't seem like a natural fix. Let's get into that. Welcome to the Tainted Tavern.
Oh, come into the Tainted Tavern, come raise a glass with me. We may not put the world to right, but we'll sure give it a go.
I've got some Gawith Hoggarth Balkan mix in the pipe. Well, after so many aromatics lately, this is a welcome change of pace, and I'm drinking a bourbon whiskey, Elijah Craig. Small batch at 97% proof. And today I want to talk about what I think of as the thinking man's heavy metal. The pipe smoker's guide to metal for the thinking man. And the band I want to talk about are Iron Maiden. But let me tell you a little story before I go into it. Several years back, I was up in the Bear Inn, in the Bear Pub up in Cowbridge, which is an ancient market town up in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's a beautiful little pub. And I went in, I ordered myself a pint, and I was standing there at the bar, and I happened to look over my shoulder. And there, believe it or not, sitting in a corner, was Bruce Dickinson, the lead singer of the rock band, or the metal band, or the progressive rock band, however you want to qualify them, Iron Maiden. And he was sitting there having a pint. Now, Bruce is a massive idol of mine, and I was so tempted to go over to him and ask him if I could have a selfie with him and have a quick chat, but I decided against it because he seemed to be enjoying his pint. But it was kind of surreal seeing Bruce there. But I later found out that he quite regularly would pop into the Bear for a pint. He was something to do with the St. Athan, which is a nearby place where there's an airfield, and he was something to do with an airfield at St. Athens. Bruce, of course, is a qualified pilot, or rather was, I believe, until very recently. I believe he's had to let his pilot license go now. But anyway, that's just a little story, and sometimes I regret not chatting to him because I don't know Bruce Dickinson, but from what I've heard speaking to people who have spoken to him and have met him, that he's quite an accessible chap, so that would be rather nice. Let me just check if I've got my microphone on. If I haven't, I'll have to go over that bit again, but I believe I've got it on. Let's put my eyes on. Yes, the microphone is on. Okay, so today I want to talk about Iron Maiden, the thinking man's metal band. Now, Iron Maiden, I don't really like the term heavy metal. I never have. And when I was a young man, it was very much, I came to my later teenage years, 14, 15, 16, was during the punk boom. And I was very much into punk rock music. In fact, I was a member of a punk rock band. We were called Vibrating Flesh. We were absolutely awful. But I fell into that mindset of heavy metal music is just ridiculous. It's all devil worship and all that crap. I was wrong, of course, and I very much enjoy what could be termed as heavy metal music these days. In fact, I probably listen to that particular genre of music more than any other. But for a long time, I had a bias against anything that could be perceived as heavy metal. In fact, the only grudging respect I would give back in those days to heavy metal bands was I thought their album covers were superb. You know, and I even lumped in bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath with heavy rock, heavy metal. I prefer the term heavy rock, to be honest with you. But I wouldn't give them the time and day because I was blinkered, because I was of this punk aesthetic that rock music had become too inaccessible to normal people, you know. There was 20-minute guitar solos. It just seemed ridiculous. So for a long time, I avoided anything by Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Iron Maiden. But Iron Maiden sort of struck a chord with me during their first two albums with their lead singer Paul Di'Anno at that time, and that was Iron Maiden, the self-titled debut album, and Killers, because as much as founder member of Iron Maiden, Steve Harris, the bass player and largely the driving force behind the band, doesn't like the term punk rock and categorizing early Maiden as punk rock, they very much did have a punk vibe during their early years. And Iron Maiden themselves, the first album and Killers, is still superb to this day, and I regularly play both albums. I've got them both on vinyl and I spin them quite regularly. They're really good. But when Bruce Dickinson, the beer drinker in the Bear Inn, joined Iron Maiden, the first album he did with them was Number of the Beast, which was the album that set him off into superstardom. And Bruce, as much as I love the Paul Di'Anno years, and I've got a grudging respect as well for the mid-period when Bruce left and they brought in Blaze Bayley for the two albums, The X Factor, and I'm not sure offhand what the second one was, but that period, I kind of listened to a few of the two of those albums recently, and you know, Blaze Bayley was pretty good, but by then Iron Maiden were established, the type of band they were. Bruce came back, of course, and Bruce remains with them to this day. There's been a lot of animosity between Bruce and Steve Harris over the years, and that might have contributed a lot to Bruce leaving the band in the first place. But they seem to have reached some sort of mutual understanding, and the last two Maiden albums, Senjutsu and Book of Souls, have been superb. And the album that preceded Book of Souls, The Final Frontier, I know a lot of people are not, a lot of Maiden fans especially, are not overly keen on that album because it brought in a lot more of the progressive nature of Iron Maiden. But I love The Final Frontier, and the final track, When the Wind Blows, which is very much based on the novel, the graphic novel When the Wind Blows, by Raymond Briggs. I think that's an absolutely superb track. And that's what I want to talk about today, the literary aspects of Iron Maiden, and also touch on the historical aspects of Iron Maiden in their songwriting, because they really are one of the most cerebral rock bands out there. Now, I've made an extensive note here because when I was working this video out, I decided to make a lot of notes because there are certain tracks I want to speak about. While listening to Iron Maiden, one could sketch out a reading list that would keep even the most dedicated bibliophile busy for a number of years. Iron Maiden have often used classic literature as a basis for their songwriting. Dracula, Bram Stoker's famous novel, was touched upon in the track Transylvania, The Phantom of the Opera, of course, and The Murders in the Rue Morgue, both songs based on Gaston Leurix's Phantom of the Opera and Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, respectively. Julius Caesar and William Shakespeare have been touched upon in tracks such as Ides of March and The Evil That Men Do, Where Eagles Dare, Alistair MacLean's novel The Charge of the Light Brigade, of course. Alfred Lord Tennyson's epic poem is used to form the basis of the track The Trooper. Quest for Fire by J.H. Rosen-Yane, Dune by Frank Herbert is very much an influence on the track To Tame a Land. You've got The Duel, Joseph Conrad's The Duel, which is very much an influence for the track The Duelist. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, of course, Samuel Taylor's Coleridge's epic poem is used incredibly well on the track of the same name on the album Power Slave. You've got The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, Alan Stiltor's kitchen sink classic, of course, used in the track of the same name. The Moonchild was very much based on Aleister Crowley. The album Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, of course, is Orson Scott Card's famous novel, which the entirety of the album Seventh Son of a Seventh Son drew its inspiration from. Run Silent, Run Deep, Edward L. Beach. You've got The Name of the Rose, Umberto Eco's historical mystery novel, was used extensively for the track Sign of the Cross. Lord of the Flies, of course, the track by Iron Maiden is very much based on the William Golding book, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. For the track The Edge of Darkness, Homer's Odyssey, Ghost of the Navigator, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. Iron Maiden are maybe one of the most cerebral rock bands out there, and they definitely in a league of their own. The literary and historical depth of their songwriting is absolutely incredible, and I defy anyone not to sit back and listen to some of their key tracks such as Rime of the Ancient Mariner, When the Wind Blows from the Final Frontier, The Loneliness of a Long-Distance Runner, To Tame a Land, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Brave New World, Lord of the Flies. I could go on and not be impressed by the sheer skill of both songwriting and musicmanship of the band. The band frequently blends heavy metal with progressive rock, and they are known for their intricate tempo changes, multi-part song structure, and dual guitar harmonies that require deep technical coordination. Maiden's thematic skills are towering. But Sign of the Cross is an absolutely astounding piece of work, and that's something that Maiden excel at, in being able to take an influence from a classic novel or even a feature film. They've done a lot of that, and melding it together into an hard rock, heavy metal, if you like, song that really goes everywhere. It just goes forever, and Maiden's tempo changes mid-track are so suited to these type of songs. Maiden really are a cerebral act. I'm just going to light my pipe a minute. Because one of the paradoxes of doing pipe smoking videos, you have to talk a lot, so your pipe tends to go out. So you don't give a true indication of what it's like to smoke a pipe, what it's like to sit there, relax, and be in the moment and enjoy the pipe, and just not even concentrate. When you're smoking a pipe well and your pipe's going well, you're almost in a meditative state of mind. But by doing these videos, you have to talk a lot to camera, and it tends that your pipe goes out. You don't give a true reflection of what pipe smoking is actually like. Another track with a literary bent is Loneliness of a Long-Distant Runner, which is on the album Somewhere in Time, which came out in 1986, and is based on the short story by Allan Stiletto, which also became one of the kitchen sink movement movies of the 1960s. It takes a band like Iron Maiden to turn this into a compelling piece of music, to a compelling piece of rock music, and it's absolutely superb. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which was the 1988 album, which is the closest that Maiden have ever come to a true concept album, used Orson Scott Card's famous novel and built an entire album around it. It's a work of genius, and it's an absolutely superb track. And Maiden, I mean, the guitar work is absolutely superb, the way their dueling guitars work together. And Bruce Dickinson's vocals, that beer drinker up in the Bear Inn in Cowbridge, he was known, and for good reason, for many years as the air raid siren, for the way he used his vocal range. He's absolutely superb. Now, I previously touched on the track When the Wind Blows, which is off the Final Frontier album, which came out in 2010. This is a story of an elderly couple, Jim and Hilda Briggs, and it's set during the Cold War period when nuclear war seemed imminent, and they mistake a rare earthquake for a nuclear attack, and they go down into the bunker that they've created in their own home, down in the cellar of their own home, which they've created from advice that Jim has listened to through the various news reports that were coming out at the time. And during the 1980s, there was that actual paranoia about a war with Russia, a nuclear war with Russia.
It is estimated that the missiles will arrive in approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
God almighty, Dux. There's only 3 minutes to go.
Stay indoors and take
Come
cover.
back, you stupid bitch, and get in the shelter.
and it's a wonderful track. It's absolutely beautiful, and the story is built up through this rock song, which, oh my gosh, it's wonderful. Let's go back. Children of the Damned from 1982, which was on the album Children of the Damned, is on The Number of the Beast, which was the album that sent Iron Maiden into the stratosphere, and it's very much based on John Wyndham's 1957 novel, The Midwich Cuckoos. Again, it's superb. I mean, you think of rock stars in their downtime snorting various drugs and bedding various groupies, and no doubt some of that has happened with Iron Maiden. I mean, let's be real. But you can imagine Steve Harris and Bruce Dickinson enjoying their downtime by sitting in their own libraries and going through vast tomes of classical literature. They really are an exceptionally good and different band, whether you want to call them hard rock, whether you want to call them progressive rock, or whether you want to call them heavy metal. I don't think they fit in comfortably with any of those genres. In fact, I think Iron Maiden are very much a genre of their own. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is probably one of their exceptional tracks. It comes from the album Power Slave, which incidentally is my favourite Maiden album. And for this track, they use Samuel Taylor Coleridge, his epic poem Rime of the Ancient Mariner. In fact, the lyrics are made up of entire sections of this poem into this track, which at the time was the longest track that Iron Maiden had recorded, and that record would be set. I think Rime of the Ancient Mariner is probably around 14 minutes, and that record for length of track would remain until the Book of Souls, when Bruce Dickinson penned the track Empire of the Clouds, which told of the airship R101 disaster. Again, that's a brilliant track, but I'll come to that in a moment. But Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an absolutely brilliantly effective track. I mean, I was educated, I say educated, this was the 1970s going into the 1980s, in a Welsh comprehensive school. We would never have touched on the poems of someone like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and it was Iron Maiden that actually made me seek out the original poem, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So in many ways, Iron Maiden and their heavy metal, stroke hard rock, stroke progressive rock music educated me far better than my formal school education did. But that was what comprehensive schools were like back in that period. I don't know how many times I had a cane. Genuinely, that's what they used to do back in those days. You know, they'd have a cane and it'd go across your hand. I had several canes. I was a bit of a swine in school. I've always been a bit of a rebel. I used to what we called mitching or bunking off school, that is skipping school, not turning up for school. I once went 6 months with a friend of mine not turning up for school day after day after day until we were discovered and caught, and then we had a cane. And our parents had a letter from the school, and there was ructions to pay. That was a long time ago, though. But even though school was brutal, the type of school I went to, I kind of look back on it fondly. There were two teachers who used to give out the cane. I won't mention them by name here, except I will say that the second one was the uncle of the page 3 girl, Linda Lewis-Hardy. But the one guy used to give the cane, it was on the hand, and it was no big deal. You could see he didn't like giving it, so you'd hold your hand out like that, he'd whack the cane down. But at the very last moment, he'd kind of pull it back so it stung. But the other guy used to give it, it was always on the arse. It'd be bend over, boy. And that was fucking painful. Okay, moving on. Trooper from Peace of Mind, which is very much based on Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade. Again, that is an excellent track. Trooper is a track that Iron Maiden still perform live to this day. And there's a beer from Robinson's Brewery, which Iron Maiden gave their name to, and you get the Iron Maiden mascot Eddie on the beer label, dressed in trooper gear from the song Trooper. Trooper's a good ale. They do a pale ale and they do a standard beer. They both very good. Murders in the Rue Morgue, of course, going back to 1981's Killers, Maiden's second album. That was when Paul Di'Anno, rather, was the lead singer. It's very much based on Poe's 1841 story. Sometimes I think Maiden may be the best red rock band out there. To Tame a Land from 1983's Peace of Mind is based on Frank Herbert's Dune. The song was originally went by the title of Dune, but Frank Herbert's lawyers got involved. Frank Herbert disliked heavy metal music and he wanted it taken off. He wanted the title Dune taken off that track, and he got his way. I would say he was probably falling into the stereotype then of what heavy metal was, and Frank Herbert was so wrong, because To Tame a Land has long survived, and it's very much a classic track even today. Brave New World from 2000, which was also the name of the album, Brave New World, which was the album in which Bruce Dickinson returned to the fold after he'd been away, after he left the band, and they got in Blaze Bayley. They did 2 albums with Blaze Bayley, then they came back with Brave New World. Brave New World, of course, was based on Aldous Huxley's 1932 classic Lord of the Flies from the X Factor, which was another one of the Blaze Bayley albums. Is very much based on William Golding's total Ed fuck of a novel. You know, Iron Maiden have constantly referenced classic literature throughout their body of work, taking inspiration from the likes of Edgar Allan Poe, Frank Herbert, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Golding, Aldous Huxley, and of course Raymond Briggs. I do like the Raymond Briggs influence song. I love When the Wind Blows. If I had to argue which were the best of Iron Maiden's literary inspired works, I would put it either as Rime of the Ancient Mariner or When the Wind Blows. I love both those tracks. I listened to actually When the Wind Blows last night. I popped the CD into the CD player up in my bedroom. Just before I went to sleep, I was laying in bed, sipping at my nightcap, which was incidentally the same as what I'm sipping at this moment. A glass of Elijah Craig, and I allowed that music to encompass me. It's a really effective track. Now, as well as taking influence from literary works, Iron Maiden have also built a lot of tracks around historical fact, or rather accepted historical fact. Ace's Eye from Power Slave is about the Battle of Britain, and it's a really effective track, absolutely brilliant track. The live version of Ace's Eye, which is on the album Live After Death, is preceded by Winston Churchill's famous "We will fight them on the beaches, we will fight them in the air, we will never surrender" speech. That's probably even more effective than the actual track on the album, even though Power Slave is probably my favourite Maiden album of all time. Passchendaele on Dance of Death, which is the second of the Blaze Bayley albums. I couldn't remember what his second album was, so yeah, it was the X Factor and Dance of Death. Dance of Death, probably the shittiest Iron Maiden cover ever. Cover artwork, the use of Eddie, that's a bit shit. But Passchendaele, based on the infamous World War I battle, is a superb track. The Longest Day from The Matter of Life and Death is, of course, based not only on Cornelius Ryan's study of the D-Day landings, but also on the D-Day landings themselves. Brilliant, brilliant track. Alexander the Great from Somewhere in Time, of course. Alexander the Great. Power Slave from Power Slave. Looks at Egyptian legend, Egyptian history. Montsegur from Dance of Death, which is the 1244 massacre of the Cathars in France. It tackles religious genocide carried out by the Catholics, so it's a really deep track. And let's end this little chat on Empire of the Souls, Empire of the Clouds from Book of Souls. Now, Bruce Dickinson, of course, famously held his own pilot license. And aviation history was a particular passion to him. Oh, I wish I'd gone over to him and talked to him in that pub that day. It would have been lovely just to have 5 minutes talking to the legend that is Bruce Dickinson. Just having a basic chat. But I would have been too fanboyish, and that's what kept me back. Plus respect for the man himself, because I didn't want to impede on his space. I would love to have 10 minutes maybe sitting down talking to Bruce, but I didn't want to impede and push myself into his personal space. But it would have been lovely to talk to him because I've got so much admiration for the man. I'd also like to point out to him that Steve Harris is actually a pretty good bloke, and that those two should learn to get on, because we don't want Bruce leaving Maiden again. But Empire of the Clouds, which is what I was talking about, it's an 18-minute song. It tells the story of the R101 disaster, the airship disaster. It starts out with a piano intro, which is probably a first for Iron Maiden at that time. I don't want to say that 100% resolutely. I'd have to look that up, but I believe it is the first for Iron Maiden. But wow, what a track. You know, he tells of the Airship 101 being launched and liken it to the airship version of the Titanic, the unsinkable. The Titanic is unsinkable. The R101 will never come down. Oh, it's such an effective track, and the way it builds. And you've got the guitar work from Maiden themselves. 3 guitars working side by side. You've got Steve Harris's galloping bass. The drums from Nico McBain. It's just an absolutely fantastic fucking piece of work. Brilliant start to finish. So anyway, it's just a little chat about the band that I would argue are the most cerebral rock band out there. That is Iron Maiden. Thanks for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Do you know any other bands that are more cerebral than Iron Maiden? Do you think that the progressive rock bands, such as Pink Floyd, are more cerebral, more intelligent? I'd argue not. But anyway, leave a comment down below. Let's get a bit of a conversation going. Also, if you haven't done so already, then please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps the channel grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Making these videos takes a certain amount of time. It takes a lot of planning. I don't just sit here and deliver all of it off the cuff, although 95% of it is off the cuff, but I must plan the subject I'm going to talk about beforehand. So it does take a little bit of work. Give this video a thumbs up. Please share this video. And if you're watching on the phone, then please press that like button. But thanks for watching. Cheers. Yaki da. And come back soon to the Tainted Tavern for more mayhem.
Please come back soon.